Hello, my dear dreamer. Tonight, let the world fall away. Let your thoughts soften and your breath grow slow. You've come to a quiet place now, one made of moonlight and moss, of still air and gentle wonder. This is a story meant to soothe. A tale of a woman who wandered through a forest she'd forgotten, and a man who had waited there quietly, tenderly for as long as dreams remembered how to bloom. You need not stay awake to hear it all. You're safe here in this hush of night. Just listen to the slow rhythm of the tale, like footsteps through dew-damp grass, and drift wherever your heart feels lightest. And now, the forest waits. Every night, just before waking, Eleanor would find herself walking through a forest of silver trees. It never frightened her. The dream was always soft, always slow. The trees weren't dark or looming, they shimmered with something quiet, like starlight stitched into bark. The ground beneath her bare feet was always warm, always a little damp, like the earth had recently remembered the rain. She never knew where she was or why she was there. She never saw anyone else, just tree after tree, their leaves whispering something she couldn't quite catch. She would walk until the dream dissolved, the way mist disappears when touched by the morning sun. And every time she woke, she forgot, not completely. A feeling would linger like the taste of something sweet she couldn't name. A calm ache in her chest, as if someone had once whispered her name with love and she had almost heard it. She told no one about the dream, not because it was a secret, but because it felt too delicate to speak aloud. Like holding a snowflake in your palm and knowing it would vanish if you looked too closely. Her waking life was ordinary, quiet, gentle even. She worked in a small library that smelled of old paper and lavender oil. She walked home beneath dusky skies, made tea, and read until her eyelids grew heavy. But every night, as her head met the pillow and her breath slowed, the forest came again, and always she walked. Always the trees knew her. Always she felt as if something or someone waited just beyond the reach of memory. And in the moments just before waking, she would pause. Her fingertips would brush a tree trunk that felt warm beneath the moss. She would hear a rustle not of branches but of movement, as though someone else walked nearby. Then her eyes would open. Morning, again, the forest gone, leaving only the ghost of stillness in her heart. But on the night our story truly begins, the dream lingers a little longer than before, long enough for Eleanor to hear the sound of something new. A soft glow, like the flicker of a lantern, moss-covered, hanging from a curved branch ahead, and a breeze whispering her name not with urgency, but with longing, Eleanor. Just the breath of it, just enough to stir something old and forgotten in her chest. And though she doesn't yet know why, she does not wake. She steps forward, and the trees begin to open. The lantern glowed softly ahead, suspended from a bent branch by a curl of vine. Its light wasn't bright, it didn't cut through the dark. Instead, it shimmered gently, casting pools of green and gold over the mossy path, like moonlight remembered how to glow from within. Eleanor stepped closer. The air around her was still, but not empty. It felt as though the forest itself was holding its breath, not in fear, but in welcome. A hush of anticipation. As she walked, her bare feet made no sound. The moss was thick and springy, dotted with tiny white flowers that glowed faintly. In the shadows, ferns bowed gently as she passed, and somewhere high above, a bird sang a single, slow note, low and sweet, like a lullaby just beginning. The lantern swung slightly as she approached, though there was no breeze. She reached out. The handle was warm in her hand, not hot, not heavy, but warm, like someone had held it just before her. Like it had been waiting. As the mossy light bathed her fingertips, Eleanor felt something shift inside her, not a memory, not quite, but a sense of return, as if her heart, quietly and without asking, had started to remember something her mind had let go. The forest ahead unfurled gently, inviting her deeper. No fear, only curiosity. The path wound slowly between silver-barked trees and soft-rooted curves. Along the way, she noticed other lanterns, each dimmer than the last, as if lit long ago. Some had vines growing around them, some dangled low and lazy. She passed beneath them like stars had fallen and hung themselves in the branches to wait for her. Time moved differently here. She didn't feel sleepy or awake, cold or warm. She simply was, and then just as the path curved toward a hollow, surrounded by ferns, she heard it. A voice, not loud, not even clear, but familiar. Not in sound, but in presence. A voice like dusk settling into the corners of an old room. Like the hush of someone thinking fondly of you without needing to speak. She turned her head slowly. Nothing but trees. But the voice came again, closer this time, not words, not yet. Just the rhythm of someone breathing, nearby, the soft shuffle of movement, not alarming, just known. Her heart didn't race, it steadied. As if it had waited for this moment, she followed the curve of the path and emerged into a small clearing where the moss grew thickest, glowing a little underfoot. And at the center of the clearing was a large tree older than the others, with bark dark as rain clouds and roots that braided into the earth like sleeping arms. At its base, a single stone bench waited. She stepped forward, sat, and as she did, the voice came again, this time, clearly, low, gentle, touched with awe. You stayed. Eleanor turned, and there, standing a few steps away, half shaded by the boughs, was a man. Not a stranger, not quite. She didn't know his name, but her heart remembered him, even if her mind had not. And in that quiet, the forest held them both. As if it had waited long enough, the man stepped from the shade of the tree slowly, as though afraid that if he moved too quickly, she might vanish like mist. He was quiet, not from shyness but reverence. His presence held no weight of expectation. Only a softness, like he'd been waiting with patience, not pressure. His hair was tousled, the color of chestnuts in the firelight. His eyes, though Eleanor couldn't name the hue, were deep, steady, and full of something ancient and gentle. He looked at her the way one looks at something beloved, long lost, and found again by grace, and still. She did not recognize him, not with her thoughts, but her heart leaned forward, curious. "I've been here," she said softly, her voice wrapping around the moss-scented air. "Haven't I?" He smiled, faint and tender, like the answer was both yes and more than yes. "Many nights," he said, "but you never stayed. You'd wake just before." She tilted her head. "Why?" His eyes glimmered. "You were always searching, but you didn't know what for." A pause passed between them, slow as falling leaves. Then she asked quietly, "And you?" "I remembered," he whispered. "Every time." He didn't move closer. He didn't need to. His presence, even from a few steps away, felt like standing near the warmth of a candle. Not blazing heat, just enough to feel held. "I knew your name before I ever heard it," he said. "Eleanor?" She blinked, not startled but stirred. "How long have you waited?" He glanced up at the canopy, where soft threads of moonlight draped through the trees like veils. "There is no time here, not in the way you know it. But long enough to learn the shape of your shadow. The sound of your footsteps through moss." Eleanor's breath caught slightly, not in surprise, but in a gentle kind of wonder. Something inside her was opening, slowly, like a bud coaxed by the promise of morning sun. "I don't know your name," she said, almost regretful. "That's all right," he replied. "You've said it before, just not with words." She looked at him for a long moment, as if memorizing a painting she hadn't realized was hers. His hands were tucked into his coat, a soft, worn thing that looked like it had known every season of this forest. The way he stood. There was no tension in him, only readiness, not to act but to remain. "Will you sit?" she asked, her voice quieter, now breathier, like she didn't want to startle the stillness. He nodded once, moved without sound, and sat beside her on the moss-covered stone bench, not close but not far, close enough that she could hear the rhythm of his breath, and in the hush between them, something deeper than memory stirred, the kind of closeness that can't be rushed, a closeness grown from silence shared. Rather than words spoken, neither needed to speak. They simply sat, lantern light flickering between them like a soft heart glowing. And somewhere, very faintly, the trees began to hum. A lullaby, perhaps, or maybe the sound trees make when love begins to remember itself. The night in the dream forest was endless, but never heavy. Moonlight spilled like soft silk across the clearing, wrapping them both in its glow. Eleanor let her fingertips rest lightly on the edge of the stone bench, feeling the cool surface. Beneath the warm brush of lantern light, she turned her head slightly, studying the man beside her. "Why do I feel like I've known you?" she whispered. He lowered his gaze to his hands, folding them loosely in his lap. "Because you have," he said, voice warm and steady. "You just don't remember in the daylight." She let the words settle. They felt true, though she couldn't place them. He looked at her, eyes soft with something close to wonder. "Do you remember the meadow?" he asked. Eleanor shook her head faintly. "There was a night when you laughed," he said, and a small, wistful smile touched his lips. "You twirled among the fireflies, and the whole forest seemed to breathe with you. You said my name then, without hesitation. You said you felt at home here." His words were gentle, but they stirred something fragile and aching inside her. She didn't remember the meadow, but she remembered the feeling. That sense of being carried by warmth, by something too quiet to name but too deep to ignore. Her eyes lifted to the branches above, where moonlight threaded through like strands of silver hair. "Why can't I remember?" she asked softly. "Because waking is heavy," he replied. "It pulls you away from what the heart knows. But each time you come back here, a little more of it returns." Eleanor exhaled, slow and steady, as though each breath entangled a knot she hadn't known was there. She looked back at him, noticing the way the light grazed his profile, the quiet kindness in the corners of his mouth, the shadowed curve of his jaw. He wasn't striking in a way that startled. He was striking in a way that felt like a home she'd never seen, but always known. "Do you wait here every night?" she asked. "Not every night," he said softly. "Only when I think of you, which is always." She smiled faintly, a soft curve of lips. It wasn't laughter. It wasn't anything bright or loud. It was quieter, something like recognition, like her heart whispering, "Oh, there you are." The forest was hushed around them, and in that stillness, something unspoken passed between them, not a memory, not even words, but a thread pulling them closer. He shifted slightly, leaning his elbow on the back of the bench. Closer, but still respectful, as if asking permission with just his presence. She didn't move away. Instead, she let her hand fall softly onto the bench between them. Her fingers brushed the moss, and after a quiet moment, his hand, warm, steady, settled close enough that their fingertips touched. Just that touch, that quiet meeting of skin, was enough to make the entire forest seem to sigh. The lantern beside them swayed gently, and Eleanor, for the first time, didn't feel like a stranger in the dream. She felt as if she'd come home. They sat in silence for a long while, the kind of silence that feels full rather than empty. The forest didn't press them forward. It simply held them, like a gentle cradle of earth and air, letting the moment unfold as slowly as it needed. Eleanor let her eyes drift across the clearing. Every leaf shimmered softly in place, unmoved by wind. The trees seemed not to grow, but rest. And beneath their branches, she felt no pressure to remember everything at once. Just being here was enough. The man beside her hadn't spoken again, but his presence had deepened. Not heavier, never heavy, but more settled, like a stone smoothed by time and rain. "I feel quiet here," she said at last. Her voice barely broke the hush. He turned toward her, and she could feel his gaze even before she met it. "You always have," he murmured, "even before you knew why." Her fingers grazed the moss again. The texture was cool, soft, forgiving. "I think I want to stay," she whispered. He didn't smile, not fully, but something in him eased his shoulders, his breath, the quiet tilt of his head. "You can," he said simply. "You always could." Eleanor looked up into the trees. Somewhere far above, a night bird sang a low, dreamy note, not mournful, not bright. Just there, like everything else in this forest, unrushed, real. She turned toward him again, and something about his expression, the way he watched her, not needing anything, just being beside her, made her lean slightly. Just enough for her shoulder to brush gently against his. He didn't shift. He didn't speak. He simply stayed, and in that soft contact, warmth bloomed between them. A warmth not of passion, but of peace. Not a fire, but a hearth. She looked down at their hands so close, not quite touching again. With quiet certainty, she let her fingers rest atop his. His thumb moved just a little, brushing her knuckle. No words. Only stillness, only truth. Around them, the forest seemed to breathe. Not with wind, but with life, with memory, with something sacred and slow. And Eleanor felt it now, not just the dream, but the belonging, as if her heart had walked through countless nights to find its way back to this bench, to this man, to this softness. I think I've been looking for this, she said. He nodded. I know. Her head tilted, resting against his shoulder just barely, just enough. And neither of them moved again. They had arrived. Time moved like breath. The forest around them remained still, not frozen, but at rest, like a lullaby that had already been sung and needed no words now. Overhead, the canopy swayed in the slow rhythm of dreams, and somewhere nearby, a cricket began to hum. Its song was soft, steady, a quiet thread weaving through the hush. Eleanor stayed there, curled lightly against him, her body weightless. In the way only dreams allow, her breathing had deepened. It matched the rhythm of the trees, slow, 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 as though each inhale pulled in the scent of moss and memory, and each exhale let go of something she no longer needed to carry. I don't want to forget again, she whispered. His voice was even softer, barely brushing the air. Then don't, but I always do, she said, her tone more accepting than sorrowful. When I wake, it slips away. He nodded, the motion brushing her temple. But maybe, he said gently, you'll remember in a different way, in how you move, in what brings you peace. In the quiet moments when you pause and feel as though something beautiful is just out of reach, maybe that's this place. Calling back, she smiled faintly. Maybe. They sat there, fingers entwined now, their hands resting in the cradle of moss between them. The lantern beside them had dimmed, not because it burned out, but because it no longer needed to shine so brightly. They had found what it was meant to guide them to. I don't know if we'll meet again, Eleanor said softly. We will, he said, with quiet certainty, when the forest calls, when your heart remembers how to wander. She closed her eyes, and though she couldn't see him, she felt him steady as tree roots, warm as dusk. I'll listen, she murmured. He nodded once more, not needing to say goodbye, because here, in this place between sleep and waking, nothing ever truly ended. It only drifted. The trees whispered once more, a hush, like leaves turned by a soft wind, a language older than words. A language made of stillness and belonging. The crickets sang their song. The moss held their footsteps, and far away, beyond the reach of the dream, morning began to stretch. But before it arrived, Eleanor leaned once more into the quiet, into him, into love that asked nothing, needed nothing, but gave everything in return. And the forest exhaled slowly, dreamily, like it had been waiting a long, long time to rest. And now, dear listener, let the forest remain with you, even as your breath deepens, even as your body softens, even as sleep begins to bloom in your chest like a hush. Let the trees guard your dreams, let the moss hold your memories, and let the love soft, waiting, quiet find its way to you again. Whenever you need it, sleep well, gentle soul. You are safe, you are home.